In the previous video, we were talking about how some of the basic definitions and heritability of various traits. So let's start by looking at some specific traits that we use in livestock selection, specifically sheep, and let's see how heritable they are. So just to manage expectations a little bit, carcass traits are probably one among the most heritable traits that we can select for. You can make rapid progress selecting for high-yielding carcasses. But when we look at the percent heritable these traits can be, they're 35, 40, 35, 30, those types of percentages. And so we're not expecting large numbers here. Dressing percent is one that's actually lowly heritable because it's more directly influenced by management traits like gut feel, mud, things like that. So when we take a look at this, we realize that percent yield in terms of high percent red meat coming off the carcass is 40% heritable. Loin depth is 35% heritable. Back fat is 30%. And that's why we ultrasound and scan our sheep for loin depth and back fat at various stages of life so that we can make selection decisions. Fleece traits. We do not have wool sheep, but for those that do manage them, for my cousin in Australia that has merino sheep, this is extremely important when you consider that staple length, or the length of the wool fiber, and the percent yield of wool off of a sheep is 40%, 55% heritable. You can make really good genetic progress selecting for various fleece traits. We could start measuring fleece weight on our sheep when we shear them and start monitoring that, but it's really not an economically important trait for us because the quality of the wool is not very good. Our growth traits tend to be more moderately heritable, ranging from 10 to 40%. But what you'll notice is that as an animal gets older and you're monitoring their weights and their gains, that's actually more highly heritable than at the younger age. So actually, if we're looking at replacement ewes and wanting to select for rate of gain, we would want to look at both pre-weaning and post-weaning rates of gain, because those ewes that gain more after weaning, actually that's more highly heritable. Oh, I love the captions. Sorry, I just saw that it put weenie on there. Anyway, but when we take a look at that heritability, what we see is that weaning weight is just 10% heritable. But if we get into the 90 to 120 to 240 day weights, those are more highly heritable and might be more accurate measures of growth rate and some of those things. So we need to put all the pieces together, so to speak. Reproductive rate. Ewe fertility is only 5% heritable. But what's one of the major things determining number of lambs to market? Ewe fertility. So it's a challenge, and that's why selecting for ewe fertility takes so much time and investment because of its low heritability that you've got to go through generations to make progress. Prolificacy, or number of babies born, twinning rate, those types of things, 10% heritable. Now, ewe productivity, in terms of pounds of lamb weaned for every ewe exposed, that's 20% heritable, which is moderate. Age at puberty and scrotal circumference are more highly heritable. They're more moderately heritable as well. And both of those can relate to fertility and be contributors, but are not the full piece. But that's why when we did breeding soundness exams, we measured scrotal circumference. We want to make sure that we're progressing on that and maintaining a minimum level to ensure ram fertility and some of those things. All right, the last thing I want to cover in this video is the nightmare that we call statistics. I'm pretty sure most of you, if you should have had stats. If not, you're going to get a crash course. But this is a normal normal bell-shaped curve, and there's the empirical rule. It's called the empirical rule. It's the 68, 95, 99 rule. Whoops. And what that is saying is that if we look at our average, so say 0 is the mean, and this is the number of standard deviations away from the mean, either positive or negative. And what we know is that about 70% of our population is going to be within one standard deviation. Then we have about 95% of our population is going to be within 2 standard deviations, and almost 100% of our population is going to be within 3. Where this is important is, say we're going to select for growth rate. Are we wanting to select animals that are on, like, negatively away from the standard deviation? So if our average was, say, 3/4 of a pound per day, these may be at a 1/2 pound per day, a 1/4 pound per day, whatever the data says. Or are we wanting to select from these outliers on this side of it, the positive side? The other aspect is perhaps we're monitoring birth weight and we don't want to get any heavier. So we want to stay within one standard deviation of our mean on birth weight, but then we want to get to the outliers out here. So we need to be able to combine this information. The activity for this section of material utilizes this empirical rule, and you're going to actually apply it to our sheep's data. You have information from our fall lambs of 2019, from the crop that's currently hitting the ground right now from fall 2020, and our mature ewes that you're going to go through and actually calculate some means and standard deviations and see how this rule works within a data set. Because this is how you can tell, like, where are your outliers and how much progress you're going to make.